Hello everyone and welcome back to my opinion. And India have beaten Pakistan by a mammoth 228 runs and have gained an advantage in the Super 4 stage of this win. From my previous video, I'd suggested that while India were in a good position going to today's play, I thought that a Pakistan side that potentially may not have been feeling the effects of yesterday's play today and therefore wouldn't have been bogged down by the previous day's proceedings would have been thinking, if we get India 160 for 4 in a best case scenario, we've got the attack and the conditions to help us to do so, then we could gain equal footing in this game. And that's why I didn't rule out Pakistan at all, despite the fact that India were in a very good position. Unfortunately for Pakistan, I'd said in the previous video that they were going in with a bowler short, in my view, with Mohammad Nawaz not playing this game. And what made things even worse for them was that before play today, Haris Rauf could not take the field for the rest of this game. Therefore, he couldn't bowl the 5 overs remaining in his quota, meaning that already without Mohammad Nawaz and without the 5 overs of Haris Rauf as well, then they had to look for other options. And when looking to put pressure on India to claw their way back into this game, then you think that that was something that would have been a constraint while they were looking to do what they wanted to do. Both batsmen started off watchfully as expected, and with the purchase offer for the seamers and the spinners, I thought it was important for Virat Kohli and KL Rahul to get through that initial phase and take India to about 195 for 3. If they got to that point in time and were only losing a maximum of 1 wicket from the start of play today, they would have got India to a concrete foundation where they could have looked to get 280 or more. Because I reiterate, this Pakistan side chasing scores above 285 in ODI cricket, it's been a struggle for them. And with the constrained bowling resources for Pakistan, with them leaving out their frontline spinner and leaving out, and rather Haris Rauf not being able to bowl his last 5 overs, it was imperative that the 2 frontline seamers in Naseem Shah and Shaheen Afridi, as well as the frontline spinner Shahzad Khan, struck early on. And as captain, I think, especially when you've got these constrained bowling resources, you've got to get your bowlers in or give them a best chance to take wickets early on, especially when there's purchase for them. I thought Babar Azam did miss a trick early on by not putting a slip in, especially for the seamers. He's been criticised for being a bit defensive in the past and was criticised for this yesterday as well. An example would be, there was a shot that Virat Kohli played, I think of Shaheen Afridi, where he played the ball fine past the keeper for 4. And had a first slip been placed there, he would not have been able to play that shot. And I know what I'm going to say doesn't take Duckworth Lewis into account, but I thought what was in India's control was to bat out a very good 50 overs. And I expected them, with a slowdown in mind, I expected them to get 195 for 3 in about 35 overs. And despite the fact it looks like they've slowed down, it's a case where throughout both innings, this surface was quite difficult for the batsmen, and because of what the openers did in the previous day, India had got to the position where even if there was a slowdown, they could have got to a concrete foundation where they could have looked to get a very good score, and they got way more than that in the end. So I thought with what the openers did yesterday, it put India in a very good position for today and allowed that slowdown and allowed them to get through that initial phase. I think that even though I expected 195 in 35 overs, there was a particular phase or a particular burst rather, which I think after that phase is over, at the 35 over mark, it was a case where how many would India get rather than any word about Pakistan coming back into the game. And I think the player responsible for that platform was KL Rahul. And despite the fact that both Virat Kohli and KL Rahul played very well and scored outstanding centuries, I think that there was a phase where KL Rahul was 25 or 45 and then scored 42 runs off his next 22 deliveries. He's scored especially very well off the spinners. The sweep shot of Iftikhar Ahmed, which started everything off. Well, I think it was quite early on in the spell. And then there was the 6 of Shadab Khan, which involved a bit of wrist work. And I think that phase of 22 deliveries meant that India could get to a 225, 30 runs more than a total that I thought they would have been satisfied with at that stage. And from then on, it was only about how many runs India would get. And after that point in time, Virat Kohli also picked up, and at the end, he was the one that was really taking on the bowlers, with KL Rahul getting a few boundaries along the way. And I think that overall, a very, very good batting performance from India. I thought that if they did get through that initial phase, like I said, without a Haris Rauf, without a Mohammad Nawaz, and even a Shaheen Afridi that didn't have his best of games today, then it was going to be quite difficult for the two bowlers, the only two that really looked like they would pose any sort of threat to the opposition. Shadab Khan with his resurgence in the last 8 overs of his quota, and a Naseem Shah who, out of the seamers, he looked like the only one who was offering any kind of threat. I thought early on, both yesterday and today, he brought some very good line and length to challenge the batsman. And when they were going for runs towards the end, there wasn't really too much Pakistan could do. In order to supplement the overs that Haris Rauf would have bowled, they bowled Iftikhar Ahmed. And you saw the case where he was the one that, with him bowling, it started off that flurry of runs to get India to 225. And I thought because of that burst, they could afford to slow down for the next few overs and really pick the player that they wanted to target. And I thought the over that made sure that India could get the kind of score that they did was the over that Iftikhar Ahmed bowled. I think his 5th over, where Virat Kohli took him for 12 runs in his first 3 deliveries. I think that increased the difference between runs and balls quite a bit. And from then on, rather than aiming for about a 320-odd score, so India could really look to get the kind of score they did, and they got 356 in the end. So, outstanding knocks from both Virat Kohli and KL Rahul. I think with Virat Kohli, we've seen there was a lot more context, I feel, with KL Rahul going to this game than Virat Kohli. I think we've seen Virat Kohli play these kind of knocks against Pakistan quite a bit. But on KL Rahul, the reason why I'm especially happy for him is because he wasn't slated to play this game, and with the injury to Shreyas Iyer last minute, he was drafted into the side. And with how Ishan Kishan's been going in the last few games, you've got a case where one of Shreyas Iyer, Ishan Kishan or KL Rahul wouldn't make the side, meaning a player that's been doing quite well wouldn't make the side. So I think in order for him to be a starting member in this team, I think he had an opportunity to cement his spot in Shreyas Iyer's absence. And he did more than that, scoring a brilliant century. And like I said, his 42 of 22 in that middle phase is the reason why India could get to the point where they could start establishing daylight between them and Pakistan in this game. So really well done to him. And Virat Kohli, with how the example that he set throughout his career, but you saw today where how many singles and how many twos he ran. I think he'd only scored 36 runs in boundaries when he brought up his century, and you saw a bit of flourish from him at the end. And I think, an outstanding innings from India already. The openers scoring brisk 50s, and Virat Kohli and KL Rahul getting such a mammoth partnership under their belt and putting India in a position where they won this game by quite some distance. The Pakistani openers walked out to bat, and straight away you thought, asking a side whose blueprint is to bat first, score around 280 and defend that score with a very good bowling attack, asking them to chase 357 would be something that's quite outside their comfort zone, and therefore I expected them to struggle in this innings. Both Jasprit Bumrah and Mohammad Siraj extracted the movement available from the surface, and at times too much movement. They bowled a few wides up front, and the first wicket to fall was that of Imran Ul Haq, a just reward with the way Bumrah was bowling until that point. He switched to around the wicket and induced the edge, and a cool take from Shubman Gill would slip. And even more than how he bowled to Imran Ul Haq and Fakhar Zaman, I thought, and of course Mohammad Siraj bowled very well as well, I thought with how he bowled to Babar Azam for the first 10 deliveries that he faced, he was swinging the ball away at pace, and through no fault of his own, Babar Azam was playing and missing in these deliveries. And I thought the moment that pretty much sealed the game, if it wasn't already sealed, was the delivery from Hardik Pandya to Babar Azam, dismissing him for 10. And you would have thought, despite the fact that Fakhar Zaman would have been the source of power for Pakistan in this innings to chase quite a big total, which required more than 7 runs to be scored per over from the get-go. I think Imam ul Haq and Babar Azam, with the form they've been in of late, you thought that they would be the ones to kind of provide a bit of an anchor while someone like a Fakhar Zaman or the other players toward the end would have been going on with using the platform that would have been set off by them from earlier. And with both Imam ul Haq and Babar Azam dismissed early on in the chase when the score was, I think, they were 46 for 2 or 43 for 2, it wasn't, Babar Azam was dismissed. You kind of thought that was the game if it wasn't suited already. So a perfect game from India. I think that there wasn't really too much to talk about from a Pakistani batting point of view. And I will say one other thing where if you are going to play Fahim Ashraf, I would have rather them played Fahim Ashraf instead of someone like an Agha Salman where he didn't bowl either. And if they had played Mohammad Nawaz, you've got a case where Iftikhar Ahmed bats at 5, Fahim Ashraf at 6, you've got Mohammad Nawaz at 7 and Shadab Khan at 8. Now, that isn't short of batting by any means, especially when you've got Shaheen Afridi and Naseem Shah who can bat a little bit. If you're relying on them to get this score, then that would have been tough anyway. But I think that you've got batting down to 8, where even if you don't play Agha Salman, who's got a good start to his ODI career so far, and you play Fahim Ashraf, you'd get a case where you'd be chasing less runs, and you've got that power on the batting lineup as well to chase a 300 kind of score if need be. Which is why I thought it was a puzzling decision to drop Mohammad Nawaz, like I said, when you'd think playing with 2 frontline spinners in Sri Lanka would have been the correct option. And yeah, I think you've seen this also with Haris Shroff not being able to bowl as far overs, that it really has transpired in quite a disastrous way for Pakistan in this game. And another player for India who has been very good in the last few years, Kuldeep Yadav, a fifer for him. This really has been some resurgence in the last few years for him, and is now India's frontline spinner in the ODI side. And yeah, I thought it was an outstanding return for him today. So pretty much every bowler bowled well. I'd said maybe they had picked Shardul Thakur since Jasit Bumrah wouldn't have been able, in case he wasn't able to bowl his full 10 over quota. He bowled a very good 5 overs up front and then left the field, then came back onto the field of play. But I thought Shardul Thakur, with the lengths he hit today, and he got the wicket of Mohammad Rizwan as well, 1 for 16 in his 4, I thought he was very good. And I think for him, if he gives this kind of a performance, hits that correct length, which I think he also did against Nepal as well, it's imperative for India that he does do that, because if they're going to play the seamers or the 3 frontline seamers, and Bumrah, Siraj and Shardul Thakur, with Hardik Pandya being the 4th seamer, I think it's important that as well as offering that batting depth, Shardul Thakur has to execute in his primary skill, which I've been saying for quite some time. He hasn't quite done that so far for the last 2 years in white ball cricket, but I think with what he's done in the last 2 games, if he can take some momentum from that into the next few games and the World Cup as well, it would serve India very well. So that was on this game. It was quite surreal to see India win the way they did, especially with how the top 4 went in scoring the runs they did in the first innings. And I think the moment that kind of total was amassed, I expected the margin of victory to be quite large, and we saw that was the case in the end. There have only been positives for India in this game, with every player that's featured, with the top 4, how they went, and with all the bowlers, they bowled very, very well. Jasit Bumrah with 5 high-quality overs in his ODI return. Kuldeep Yadav with an excellent 5 for continuing his resurgence in the last couple of years. And I think Shardul Thakur's performance today, combined with the one that he gave against Nepal, with the areas that he hit in both these games, he should build on this going into the World Cup. I think that he has to perform the role, like I've mentioned quite a few times, where in the last few years, his bowling, in terms of economy especially, hasn't quite been there in white ball cricket, and that's something he's going to have to get back, since he is the 3rd seamer in this side, with Hardik Pandya being the 4th. So, as well as offering the batting option that he offers, I think he has to specialise in his primary skill, which is being a bowling all-rounder. And if he does do that, then it rounds off his attack quite nicely. So that is on him. And on the middle order conundrum, you've got a KL Rahul who hasn't played cricket since early May, returning today for this game. In fact, he wasn't slated to play this game if Shreyas was fit, so he took his opportunity in quite some style. And in a high-pressure game against Pakistan, scoring a century on return, outstanding innings. And you've got a Virat Kohli who's played these kind of knocks before, and like I've said, the fitness standards that he exhibits, I think anyone would do. And running between the wickets has been a feature of his game for the entirety of his career thus far. And you saw the amount of twos that he ran today with Rahul getting an injury, I think a quadricep injury. He was tested quite a bit today, but he also managed quite well. So I think great signs for India from this game, and you think if they can continue for this momentum going into the World Cup, then you've got a side who that was looking a bit precarious, especially in the batting front. But I think off late, you've got some players in the middle order, for example, that have emerged, and there's some competition as to who's going to start. So let's see how they go against Sri Lanka in a few hours' time. There's not much of a turnover between these two games, and let's see how they go. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Share it with your friends. Remember, this is my opinion. What's yours?